on, everybody? This is Chuck, and you are listening to the ITXP. Today, I'm going to pivot a little bit and give you a story around what it's like to be middle management. I've been middle management now almost about 10 years, maybe 12 years. Um, and I'd say true middle management, maybe middle upper management, depending on how you look at it, because I do have direct line managers reporting under me. And then I also report into one, two, three, four. Jesus, I'm like four tiers separated between the CEO and myself. It used to be three, and then they added another level because why not? Right. And it started to make me think is like, well, what the hell am I doing in this role? Right. I'm still senior technical lead for a lot of technologies in the cloud and directory services. And I manage, a significant number of folks from cloud and directory services. And like I said, two of those team members are direct line managers with people under them, at least five or more. So I'm not middle management. I'm like upper middle management, but I'm like, what's the point? And when I looked through some data in trying to pull up some information for this episode, I came across the Deloitte article, right, in where they actually surveyed um, about let's see, what did they survey? They surveyed about 23,000 respondents across 44 countries. Right. Now, this is a Deloitte 2025 Gen Z and Millennial survey. Right. So, the 23,000 respondents, 44 countries. Only 6% of Gen Z workers say reaching senior leadership is their primary career goal. Right. So, let that sink in. That means 94% of them are looking for something else entirely. And this isn't some random blog post, right? Deloitte surveyed 15,000 Gen Z workers and almost 9,000 millennials across these 44 countries from October through December of 24. And it's the 14th year that they've done this survey, and they're tracking the real shifts, not just momentary blips, right? So they're really digging in on this data. They have 14 years of data, and they're seeing that Gen Z is like, you know what? Shit, I'm not going to become a manager. And one of the reasons why they do this, right, is because a lot of them feel like they're only getting so much of, of an increase in pay for 5x, 10x times the work, right? So it's one of those things where you'll see that 94% rejection rate isn't entitlement, it's pattern recognition, right? They did the math. The Gen Z folks did the math. They figure for 10% more pay and 40% of the misery, screw that. I'm going to pass. A lot of them are actually seeing the individual contributors making a hell of a lot more money than managers, right? So they're seeing principal engineers making anywhere between 200,000 and 300,000, right? That's base salary. And, developers start at 85, senior engineers start at 110,000. This isn't tech, right? We're not talking about anything other than tech. This is a tech focused show, but it really provides some insight into shit. Why did I go into management? Right? Why did I actually do this? What actually made me feel like shit? I should just lead some people. Um, and I'll tell you why from my perspective. Because my first role as a manager was when I was 32. So, 15, 14, I don't know how many, 17 years ago is my first foray into management. And that was true middle management. 2 years later, I got promoted into what I guess we would call a senior manager role. I had a direct report who was a manager who had like maybe two or three folks under him, and that had maybe 15 people altogether on my team. And now, 17 years later, I've doubled it. But between that time and this new role, there was a period of about 4 or 5 years that I went back to becoming an individual contributor because I made more money. Now, one of the things that pulled me away from being an individual contributor, two things, right? First one was the money, yes, right? Because at the time, the base salary for a leader, a manager, was a lot more than an individual contributor, right? Now, again, we're talking 17 years ago. And secondly, the incentives were a lot better. because you had this discretionary bonus, you had stock options, right? Things like that. What do they call them now? I forget. Oh, reserved units, right? Um, so it was a lot more incentivized to become a manager. And in my earlier career, when I had that opportunity to manage some people, right? It was one of those things where they did restructuring and they found that they needed some leaders in this space. And because I was such a strong individual contributor and people can trust me and things like that, they felt like I would be able to do a good job in that space. And frankly, I did, right? I was able to grow a lot of the engineers in that space and I had a very young team. And for except for one person, everybody else really excelled and moved on with their careers. One I still talk to today. He's in the security space now, and he's been killing it in that career. So, you know, why did I go into management, and why am I still in management? It was a lot driven by money, and then secondly, the other thing was I didn't want to get called on weekends. Like, I didn't want to get called on weekends and late at night and things like that. And dealing with the bullshit of issues, and I wanted to delegate that out to some people. And here I am, 17 years later. I still get called in the middle of the night because, look, I'm supposed to be leading my team. If there's an outage, I should be on these calls, especially for high severity calls. Now, I do get called less frequently than I have before, but it still happens, right? So, as a leader, you have to expect that you're now on the hook for a lot more than you were previously. So, you know, that was the second reason why I didn't want to stay as an individual contributor. And it turns out that I'm actually more obligated to jump on calls, even when it's not an issue that's potentially caused by my team or the technologies that we oversee. And being in the public cloud space, 9 times out of 10, I have to be on a call because if it's a public cloud outage, then it's a problem, right? So in this survey of Deloitte, Gen Z is like, screw this. I'm going to stay as individual contributor, and a lot of that is because organizations have realized that you may be too top heavy with the manager space, right? And now you want to ensure that you continue building out a workforce, continue building out products. So you're like, yeah, I'm going to just give give more incentive to the individual contributors and give them um, more money in terms of base pay or even discretionary bonuses, right? So one of the reports in that survey said staff engineers from an IT perspective now earn between 170 to 250K without managing anyone. And I've seen that in my own organization, where pockets of folks within the organization are individual contributors and they have specialized skill sets that are making way more than I am, and they don't manage anybody. But again, specialized skill sets, right? We're talking about the quants, the PhDs, and things like that that are dealing with various risk factors, right? I don't want to get too much into where I work, but we deal with a lot of risk. So some of those folks are doing some really complicated things in terms of building models and things like that. And they're making money and they're developing product. They're including those models in their product, right? And selling it. And the company's making money hand over fist, especially with AI. So it's like, whoo, maybe it's just time to go back to becoming a specialized individual contributor, right? And then the other thing is dealing with the bullshit, right? Dealing with the bullshit around management and selling your team and selling ideas around some of the technologies that you want to improve upon and having that foresight and vision to really build out your team or seeing gaps in the organization where you feel like they can be filled by either another job function or something similar. And the reason I bring that up because I'm actually going through this now. Now, this is something that if you've been following me for a while, know that in my earlier role in this career, excuse me, in my earlier role in this job, I was leading the directory services team. And the directory services team was outsourced. So again, we have domain admins outsourced to a third party. And I saw that as a big risk. And I had a new manager come in around 2019, and he saw the same thing. I said, hey, look, I've been trying to get these folks insourced for the longest time. Right. So I was there 3 years at that point. And he said, you know what, Charles, let me help you out here. Let me see what we can do. And he and I both together were trying to influence senior leadership to insource at least the domain admin function because it's a big risk for the organization. Long story short, that never panned out. Fast forward 5 years, 6 years later, we did complete our insourcing effort, and the domain admins are now part of the organization. So as I started looking at where there are inefficiencies and where we can gain some effectiveness, because again, if you've been following along, directory services is now back under my scope of responsibility and accountability. I had to figure out what we're going to do with the team in terms of incorporating them into the public cloud space. So as I started going through and talking to the team, now mind you, I've been out of directory services for 3 years. And when I mean out of directory services, I mean completely out of directory services. I did not look back at all, right? I didn't even care what was going on. I just said, you know what? I'm going to focus on public cloud and get everything ready to really take on the challenges within public cloud, automation, and things like that. And there, again, if you've been following along, there's been a lot of turmoil in my career in this role. Had a larger team managing engineering operations, and that blew up in 23, lost 75% of the team to a different organization due to restructuring, and was left with 5 people, three ops guys, myself, and oh no, three ops guys, a delivery manager, and an architect. And within those tumultuous times, we delivered new AI infrastructure on Azure. We deployed new infrastructure on GCP, right? All with those 5 people. So I have proven my ability to execute and deliver with the resources that I have. Now, one of the things that I'll tell you is I am the type of guy that just put my head down and just get shit done, right? But I've learned over the course of time, and I knew this while this was going on, but I just had to get shit done to effectively make a name for myself, by first of all not bitching about it, right, to the senior leaders, and secondly to demonstrate that I can execute with a minimum amount of resources. So that's that. So as I started looking through the directory services team, domain admin team, I started talking to some of the security folks. And some of the security folks were explaining to me some of the gaps within the team, within the technology, and things like that. I said, you know what? We really, really need to reshift our focus from directory services into more modern authentication. And I said, I need to pitch a new job function to my senior leaders. Now, mind you, I just got a new boss, maybe 2 months ago. So I'm still very much in line with my previous manager, who's now my boss's boss, right? Um, and I don't know why I was put under this new tower called cloud services, but it is what it is. But I always told people that I don't care who I report to. I'm still going to share what I'm doing across the spectrum of leaders, right? Because now I feel like we're top heavy, and it's just a mess right now. Right now, it's a mess. So a couple of months ago, I started talking to the managing director of infrastructure, my former boss, and I pitched to him the idea of an identity engineer, and his eyes just lit up. His eyes just lit up. He was like, tell me some more. So I gave him a very brief, high level overview of what I was thinking, but I said, hey, let me kind of contemplate on this some more. Let me think through this some more, and I'll give you something formal in December. right? Because obviously the holidays with Thanksgiving, I was at Ignite, and he was traveling too. He's like, yeah, yeah, no problem. Let's we'll touch base in December. So just last week, I presented the idea to both my direct line manager and the managing director. Now, mind you, after that discussion with the managing director, I also had a discussion with my direct line manager about taking the domain admin team function out of operations and bringing them into engineering. And I opened up the conversation. I was like, hey, just so you know, I'm not trying to build an empire here. I'm just trying to align our resources more strategically than they are now. And I felt like the domain admin team is sitting in the operation side of the house is a missed opportunity. And that's how I put it. Right? And the reason I'm telling you this story is so you see how I navigated this, and I'll explain to you throughout the course of this, the different feedback I received and how I'm approaching that feedback because there's two different perspectives on this feedback. And that's why I'm telling you this story. So if you're going through similar challenges with your senior leaders or you're an individual contributor and you're trying to see if management's right for you, maybe this story is going to be beneficial to you, right? So he kind of saw my point. He's like, "Yeah, I kind of see that, but tell me more." And I said, "Well, I'm still working on it. Let me give me till December because of blah blah blah." He's like, "No problem whatsoever." Last week he was at reInvent. The week prior was Thanksgiving. The week prior to that was Ignite, and I was at Ignite. So it was, again, just timing wasn't right to kind of put stuff together. So last week I had time because he was gone and he wasn't breathing down my neck on a couple different things. I had to deal with some roadmap work for the products that I manage now, and I put this new job function together, right? And I have to say that if you're not using AI to help you a lot with this stuff, you better start using AI now. I've said this time and time again. So I use Claude primarily now for pitching ideas and helping me workshop some different ideas. Only because Claude seems to be more conducive to that consultative nature, right? Because I've kind of built instructions in there to really challenge me on some of my thought processes, to challenge me on some of my ideas, and we really have a sparring session. Right? We really call it a sparring session. Now, I've also done this with ChatGPT. I've not done it with Gemini, but I've done it with ChatGPT. And ChatGPT, I always feel is like, I don't know, the technical yes man. Even though I give it instructions not to do that, it's still very much like, yeah, no, this will work, and it just whatever, right? I just felt like it's not as conducive to ideation as Claude is today, right? So I leverage Claude and I bounce ideas off of it. It challenges me. It really look if you ever watch me work with Claude for some of my other projects, you'll see me saying, "Wow, that's a really good idea." But how about if we pivot to this and it'll challenge me back and say, "Yep, no, that actually is a right move, but consider X, Y, and Z." So Claude for me has been really my partner in a lot of the things that I'm doing. So I leverage it a lot for ideation and flushing out some ideas that I have in my head, and then being able to pitch them to senior leadership, writing the proposals, writing the job descriptions, allowing me to tweak it, using my own words, right? So I trained it on a bunch of emails that I've written in the past, a bunch of SOPs and documentation that I've done, so it knows me now, right? So when I say no, make this sound like me, it'll do it, and then obviously I have to tweak it here and there because it still does its AI thing. So, but for the most part, it saved me literally hours and days worth of work because now I've trained it over the past year and a half, right? Because I've been using it since it was released, and I have all this stuff out here that it knows me. It knows some of the ideas that I put together. It now with memory, it references it. So this is not a pitch for Claude. It's just saying you should be using some AI tool in your work today. Now, you may not be able to use it at work, so don't be stupid and uploading shit from work into these models. No, have it on your phone, right? Talk to it, do it, but don't put work data in there. Okay, don't be stupid. So I leverage Claude for to help me with not only with the job description, but also with how I was going to pitch it to um, to my management team. All right. Um, so I pitched it, and immediately my managing director was like, first gut impression, this is fantastic. And remind you, managing directors are always thinking strategically and vision, right? He's like, wow, this is great. I like the way you positioned this. Let me look at the job description over the weekend. And sure enough, Sunday, I got a message back from him. Yes, I look at my email on Sunday. And he said, I really like the job description. It seems aspirational, but I get where you're going. Let your boss chime in before we decide anything in terms of next step. It's like, fine. I said, you know what? Let me add some color commentary to why I think it's aspirational. And I provided my feedback again to that, just so they understood where my mind was at. And I think a lot of it needs to come from you, right? When you're thinking about this stuff, a lot of it needs to come from you. So the other thing, right? So anyway, that was my managing director. Um, my direct line manager was at Ignite, didn't look at it, doesn't do stuff over the weekend so far as I can see. Again, it's only been a few months. This morning he came back and he said, "Hey, I took a look at it. It looks good. There seems to be um, two distinct skill sets. One is an IM engineer reserved for cyber organizations, and then the other one's infrastructure AD engineer focusing on AD design engineering." And he's like, I do agree we need a blend, but the role should lean toward the AD engineer side of the equation. And this is where I feel like he either didn't understand what I was trying to pitch, right? Because one of the things, because the reason I say that is because he said the IM engineer typically reserved for cyber organizations. So this tells me he doesn't understand what my team does today, because my team does IM today, and my team being the public cloud team. So that means that now I have to educate him on the role that we play in identity and access management space, right? Yes, cyber has an identity and access management team, but they don't manage the IM roles within the public cloud providers. My team does. So what they do is they define the standard set of privileged roles with our help, right? With our collaboration. They define the standard set of privileged roles and we execute them. So and then what we do is if there's a new role that's required, we pitch it to them saying, hey, the business has come to us looking for this new role. Here's the roles. Here are the permissions for that role. Please review and let us know if you'd like us to execute. Right. So right now, I feel like he doesn't understand because again, it's only been a few months and he hasn't been focusing too much on my space. He's been focusing on other space. So it seems like I have to do some work with him, right? And this is really your job as a middle manager, right? Managing up. So now I have to educate my direct line manager, right, to ensure that he understands what we do on a day-to-day basis, right? So IM engineering is us to an extent, right? Um, and I need to make sure he understands what I'm trying to get at. This is not an AD engineer position. This is an identity infrastructure engineering position. And that's going to be the biggest challenge when you're working in this upper middle management type role, is ensuring that the people that you kind of pitch this to have an understanding what the hell you do first. Because if they don't understand what you do first, then that's going to be a problem. Right. So getting back to the whole crux of the situation here and dealing with management, right, is individual contributors can also pitch strategic vision, and they should be pitching strategic ideas and visions and plans and roadmaps, right? But they do it under the guise that I'm going to pitch this. It's really not my job, but I'm going to make sure that my voice is heard. And if it gets selected, whatever, it's the management's job to deal with what needs to be done to deliver on and execute on this stuff, right? So that's kind of a glimpse of what I have to deal with as a middle manager in terms of dealing with what you call it, upper management and try to sell and pitch ideas. Excuse me. So now going back to the Gen Z stuff, right? And why they're they're skipping, they're foregoing the desire for management, right? Is kind of the hidden costs of what I just talked to you about, right? There's meetings all day. I'm sure I'm going to have meetings about this. It's for 6 to 8 hours of meetings all day. If you look at my calendar, it's meeting after meeting after meeting, sometimes triple book, sometimes quadruple book. But again, I've always said you own your calendar, right? If you don't own your calendar, somebody else is going to own it for you. The reason why I have triple book, quadruple book meetings is because sometimes I delegate that meeting to somebody else. And I want to make sure that I remember that, oh, yeah, I delegated that meeting to someone and this is what they talked about. So in our team meetings, I ask, oh, by the way, how was that meeting in case they forget to tell me, right? Um, the other thing is context switching. There's a lot of context switching. You're going from one meeting to next to next to next, right? As opposed to just locking your way away for 4 hours to do deep work, which is what most senior engineers should be doing, right? You're managing up, you're managing down, you're managing sideways. You're also the first to be let go in layoffs and the last to know why. Right? So when you're a middle manager, these are some of the things that it should be concerning to you. Um, so when I think about why Gen Z is foregoing it, that's really kind of one of the other things. And then the last one is really um, what Gen Z actually wants, right? So first and foremost, Gen Z want a fair compensation without the management tax. We talked about that before, right? The meetings, the context switching, the emotional labor, the career risk. They want meaning. They want a direct connection between work and the impact. And I've seen this even with my own team. They want to know what the bigger picture is. And if they're still asking me that question after Q2, then I haven't done my job effectively because they need to understand why we're doing things. Um, and they also want to feel financially secure without feeling burnt out, right? And as someone that's in Gen X, I feel like we kind of wanted that too, to some degree, because again, we grew up in the '80s of Wall Street and greed is good, and honestly, we don't care. We just want to do our job, get paid, and just fuck off after a while, right? So I feel like Gen X and Gen Z are almost in kind of the same mindset in what career and work means to you. I wouldn't say Gen X folks care about the impact that they have. Maybe some of us do because we're kind of a blend of what we see from, at least me, right? At least what we see from millennials and Gen Z. It kind of makes sense. But at the end of the day, I can give two shits. Just pay me, right? Pay me for the work that I'm doing. If you don't like the work that I'm doing, tell me so I can make it better. So I feel like Gen Z is taking our mindset and kind of incorporating it into their own culture of right money, meaning, and well-being. Right. So now, if you look at how they present themselves from a new leadership model, right? They have that technical leadership, right? The architect who saves X amount of money, right, over the manager of three people. Because what is business always looking at? And I always tell this to my team: you have to show value for the work that you do. If you're saving $18 million over the course of a year because we implemented these cost saving opportunities, hey, that's work that you did. Right. Platform decisions affecting 500 engineers, right? They're setting the standards that the entire company follows, right? So they're still enacting change. They're still influencing. They just don't have to manage people, right? They influence their expertise. They're the person that everyone asks. That's me, but now I also manage like 15, 20 people, right? They shape the product direction through deep knowledge. Again, people come to them for their insights. They build systems that scale beyond any team. It doesn't matter who manages it, manages the application, whatever the system. They're building it so it can be either autonomous or or is documented enough where someone coming off the street can understand it and continue driving. Right. Um, and it's one of those things where Gen Z, I think. has the right idea and really makes me rethink this whole management game. Really makes me rethink this whole management game. As I'm now approaching 10 years in this organization, that's a long time. This will be the second time I've hit a 10-year mark at an organization. And I'm starting to think of, is it my time to go? Do I pivot into a different role in this organization? Do I continue moving up the ladder? Or do I go sideways and be an individual contributor again as a senior principal or distinguished engineer level? Right. So that's going to be some decision points that I have. Um, and it's one of those things where not every organization has a track for individual contributors. I know we did when I first started. I remember seeing some HR org chart where we had a roadmap for individual contributors versus management, and that was pretty interesting and insightful. But I don't even know where we are with that going forward. Right? Um, you know, the the future of work, right, is not so much everyone becoming a manager. And I think I've said this in a few different shows before, in where not everybody is cut out to be a manager. They're not. Not everybody's cut out to be a manager. Not everybody is cut out to lead people. Some people can't even lead themselves, let alone three or four direct reports. So why are we pushing this narrative on making people managers and leaders? Yes, I get you can't have somebody managing 20 people. That's just insane. I think someone in my organization said HR doesn't like to have more than 8 people aligned with a manager. So if you're at a large organization, and my company's not a large organization, I'd say it's a mid-sized organization. But if you're at a company with a large organization, like say 100,000 plus people, 50,000 plus people, to me that's large. You're going to need managers to manage the people. Somebody may say, well, why even have managers to begin with? Right? And a lot of it is because paperwork. It's paperwork. And I've told my team, I was like, look, you don't work for me. You work for the company. We all work for the company. We have the shared vision to execute and deliver on technologies that we support. But I'm here to provide that guidance for you to help you navigate this this path to success. I'm here to remove any blockers for you because of my experience with talking to folks outside of our organization, our team, I should say. That's why there's managers. But if you're a manager now and you feel like your voice isn't being heard, then it's one or two things. You're not managing up properly, and two, maybe you're just not cut out for this. Because again, not everybody should be a manager. And it's a hard pill to swallow when you hear that. It really is a hard pill to swallow when you hear that because I never wanted to be a manager. Right? I always say, fear the person who wishes to be king because they have alternative plans, right? And there's this guy who I used to work with at the law firm that the law firm actually created a management position for me, partly because I was bitching to them about my career growth, and secondly because they wanted to keep me. But it was a double-edged sword because yes, I would get the manager title, but then they would lock me into a career path, at least in that organization, that just was not meant for me because they were scared of me moving up because I'm not your traditional employee, right? I'm not the guy that's going to be subservient, and that's what they wanted. Even though they say they didn't want it, they want it. And if you really think about it, that's what a lot of people want. They just want people to kind of agree with them and not push push back a lot. Some people do, some people don't. I thrive on it. I want you to challenge me because that shows me that you actually care. And it also helps me rethink some of my ideas to ensure that they're in alignment with how we work and in alignment with the overall organizational strategy, right? So this one guy who wanted to be a manager at this law firm, he asked me, he's like, "Hey, are you applying to that manager role?" I was like, I don't think so. Because unbeknownst to him, I was planning on leaving anyway. Some of the other guys knew already, but he didn't know. So he's like, "Can I apply to it?" I was like, "Yeah, sure. Why not?" Like, I'm not. It's not my job, right? It's just a position they opened up. Yes, they opened it up for me, but I still have to apply for it and things like that, which is another load of bullshit, right? They create a position for you and then they make you apply to it. I never understood that. So anyway, so he applied to it and he got it. And the way his demeanor changed right afterwards, it was like a 180 flip. Now, this is a guy we would go out to lunch with, right? And we would do liquid lunches because most of us could handle it. He did liquid lunches and we would talk shop and shit about our manager all the time. And when this guy became a manager, he flipped the script so badly that the normal crew that would do lunch stopped going out to lunch for a little bit because he knew where everybody was, right? It was either at Bill's Bar and Burger, it was either at Del Frisco's, right? It was either at this Mexican joint that's no longer open that I fucking pissed off that they closed because they had some really good frozen margaritas. Um, Everybody stopped going to lunch. Right? They all started bringing lunch or they started doing individual lunches, right? Because this guy was such an asshole when he became manager that it got to a point where I think they just removed them off of group chats, right? So I always say fear the man who wishes to be king because there's always an alternative motive for them, right? It's kind of what like one of those things where so I like military history and I just like appreciate the military. Some of you may or may not remember I tried to enlist a few times, not a few times. I tried to enlist the Marines and then the Army. I never did the Navy or Air Force because after the so first of all, when I called the Marines, right? They this was in high school, I think. Yeah, senior year of high school. I had already planned on going to college, but because I wanted to be a doctor and at that point in time a trauma room surgeon, I felt for my career, it would be more beneficial for me to go into the military because of the different scenarios that they would be presented in, right? Um, and when I called them Marines, I don't know why I called them Marines. Anyway, they asked me my height and weight, and then when I told them my weight, obviously I was obese. They asked me my neck size, and I just heard them laughing in the background. I was like, okay, thanks. And then the armor recruiter actually came to my house. He took me to the recruitment station. I took the ASVAB. Um, and by that point, I had already gotten accepted to a few of the colleges that I applied to. And I said, you know what? Um, yeah, the army's not going to be for me. I'm gonna go to college, right? Um, and look, I was still overweight for the army, right? So it wasn't something where I had this, you know, I had these decisions to make between the military or university. It's just like I could never get into the military because of my weight. And nothing motivated me to lose that weight just to get into the military. It wasn't that serious for me, right? I just saw it as an opportunity for me, if I wanted to get into medicine, to get into the military. But then I realized after the fact that I didn't have a choice of whether I can go into medicine, right? In the military, right? It's whatever you score on your ASVAB. That's what, right? It's like it's not like you say, "Oh, I want to do this." Oh no, I don't like this. I'm gonna do this. They kind of tell you what to do. Um, and I didn't understand that when I applied. So I have a soft spot for kind of the military cadence and things like that. So when I read stories about military history and you read these stories about those who became generals that really didn't want to, but they did it because they were able to execute and deliver and lead teams successfully as an individual contributor. Those are the people that you want because those are the people that are actually going to deliver better for you than the people that want to, right? And you'll see this coming out of college, and even more so recently, where People are like, oh, I got my MBA. I should be able to lead a team of like 50 people. No, you shouldn't. You should actually get in the trenches and understand the business some more, right? To be able to lead people. Because leading people is not just about driving towards execution and excellence, right? It's about understanding the people that working for you, navigating some of those emotional roller coasters. I'm dealing with something now with one of my direct line reports, and it's just like, holy shit, dude. It's. I'm not going to get into it, but I'm like, damn, dude. I was like, you got a lot of personal stuff going on that, frankly, you shouldn't be sharing with me, right? I've told them this, and like, secondly, some of the stuff you tell me, I have to go to HR, and if you don't go to HR, I will. And fortunately for him, he went to HR and was able to do what he needed to take care of his personal stuff. But this is the shit you got to deal with when you're dealing with people, right? Because you're dealing with people's livelihoods. It's not so much about driving towards excellence and delivering a product and things like that. It's you're dealing with people. And when you deal with people, you deal with emotions. You deal with all the bullshit around that. You deal with people like not wanting to work or disappearing for hours at a time. That was me. Like I would disappear for hours at a time, hanging out, going out, day drinking, and things like that. And then that was something that I've been doing, since I was a teenager, right? So I know some of these things that people do when when they're at work, because a lot of people don't want to work and they want to get paid for not working. Believe me, I've done it, so I know, so I get it. So when I try to do something from an employee improvement perspective, right? I kind of give those stories of like, look, I know it sucks to do X, Y, and Z, and I know maybe you have to work on a weekend. I'll make it up to you, this and that, right? Make sure you get a comp day. Tell me about it. I had a senior architect who had to work during his day off because there was something that was kind of tight deadline for the business, and he was the only guy working on it. And I said, hey, I saw that you were working on this with the vendor, and make sure you take a comp day because I want to make sure that you make up that day. Right? These are the things that you deal with as being a manager. So somebody with an MBA that feels like, oh, I can come in and lead teams. The hell you can, because if you're not emotionally stable enough to deal with the shit that people come up to you with every fucking day, right? Then you're not meant to be dealing with that. If you don't have that emotional intelligence, right, and that capacity to kind of suck in and take in everybody else's problems, you're not going to be a good cutout for a leader, right? And I see this is why, empirically, right? I kind of see this is where Gen Z is like, yeah, man, I'm not dealing with this bullshit. There's too much bullshit for people to deal with. That, yeah, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to stick to an individual contributor and just deal with my own bullshit. And I think honestly, with all the surveys and the questions that Deloitte asked and things like that, I'm like the bottom line is people don't want to deal with other people's bullshit. Plain and simple. They don't want to deal with other people's bullshit. They don't want to deal with how management doesn't make decisions in time or kind of pushes back because they don't understand, or maybe management is afraid of you because they know that you're going to be more successful than they are, whatever, right? And that happens, right? It's actually my direct line manager said that to me once before because I was joking around. I was like, "Hey, a lot of people don't like me, so don't feel like you're gonna get information from other people." Um, or I forgot what I said, but I said a lot of people don't like me. That's because I wasn't invited to a meeting, so I said that's okay. Not many people like me, so they don't invite me to meeting. And he flat out says with a straight face, like maybe they're afraid of you. And I just looked at him, I was like, okay, sure, whatever. I mean, if that's the case, then why are you a manager? Like, seriously, like, why are you afraid of somebody else at work? Right? Somebody's going to dick you over or do something to you, right? Call them out on it, right? So right now, I'm actually last thing before I go, I'm actually doing a presentation around Azure Foundry from Ignite, the things I learned at Ignite, and one of the guys from another team said, "Hey, I want to do this presentation with you, and I want to talk about this as well." And I said, "That's fine, but I have like the framework of my presentation already done, right? Because I did." And I sent it to him. I was like, "Give me your feedback," and he hasn't provided me his feedback yet, right? But one thing about this guy is I can't trust him for shit, right? So one of the things that I'm concerned about is him probably um, poaching my presentation and making it his. We'll see. He doesn't know me yet, but I will call him out in front of everybody, like God. I will call him out in front of God and show the receipts on what I did to help him do whatever he does. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But next week I'm going to be driving into how AI is making middle management obsolete, including my job, and why that may be the best thing to ever happen to your career. Because again, we talked about individual contributor versus middle management. And then you may be thinking, well, how the hell do I move from individual contributor to management if we're getting rid of middle managers? Like, where do I do? So we'll talk through that some more. So if you're still listening to this, your homework is map your current role to both paths. So what it would look like what would it look like for a staff principal in your organization? What would management look like? And look at the real math, right? What's the compensation, the hours, the stress, and then share what you've discovered, right? Pitch it to me in TikTok. You send it to me in emails, so social dash media at the itxp.com. And we'll kind of take it from there. But yeah, next week's gonna be interesting, right? I talked to you a little bit how I'm leveraging AI. AI can be your manager. Shit. At our company, we're doing a project manager agent, AI agent. And you could see some of the eyebrows in the room. Most of them were project managers. They're like, what? Right? So AI agents are going to make jobs obsolete. Now, you still need the human factor in this, but you can decrease the number of humans that you need to run a job efficiently or run an organization efficiently. If you all don't understand that now, you're sleeping on what the hell AI is meant to do. This isn't about um it just is this isn't about the technology. It's about running organizations with fewer and fewer people. We saw that in the manufacturing industry, and we're going to see this in the knowledge worker industry. Trust me. Trust me, we're seeing this. So, market December 2025. Chuck from the ITXP says AI will transform the knowledge worker industry into fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer people. All right. Thanks for listening, and I will catch you.